Hello YouTube, welcome back to Assetto Corsa, and today with me with a scratchy throat we're going to be reviewing the Porsche 911 GT1 1998. Now I have to say 1998 because this is a very specific car, just like the Porsche 962C was, a specific car for a specific year. The reason being is that things do change in the world of racing, and the 1998 version was somewhat different from the previous versions. Bit of history about this car that might actually interest you guys. The car itself, obviously, they started out with the 962. Porsche were doing incredibly well with the 962 that we reviewed in the last episode. They were also doing well with the 956, which we mentioned in the last episode, which is basically what the 962 then came from. It was, it was originally a 956 that was then adapted. We mentioned this. So Porsche had not had a racing team, a works racing team. They used to obviously do customer teams. We mentioned that at some point as well. But they never used to have a works team. And they didn't have a works team actually for quite a while. And then they did, they decided, well, hang on, why don't we enter this GT2 racing? I know this is a GT1 car, I'm getting to it. So they entered GT2 racing, and there were some very specific rules about GT2 racing, and all they did was get the 911 they had, you know, your road-going car, and made it a bit of a sports car. So that was fine. Now what was happening is that while they were doing that, all the big guns, you know, things that you expect Porsche to compete against, McLaren, Jaguar, Ferrari, things like that, they were out in the GT1 class, particularly I think McLaren, dominating the GT1 class. So Porsche thought, well, hang on, how about we attempt this? So they said, okay. So they decided in 1995, let's go ahead and try and turn a GT2 Porsche into a GT1 car. Took them a while, and then they did manage to get the car done in 1996, I believe. And then in 1996, they managed to get one of these out, and it was a very, very decent car, and it actually did really, really well. This Porsche 911 GT1 car now. So it did really well, and you know they had some problems because obviously it was a new car. They were using steel in their chassis and all that kind of stuff. And I'm telling you this because it does come in. It does make sense when I start talking about this particular car. So, you know, using steel, it was heavier. Everyone else was using some sort of composite, whether it was carbon fiber reinforced polymers, honeycomb structures, you know, lattices, things like that. It just didn't have, you know, it didn't have much sense in what the car that they were making. So they had to try and compromise. You know, they were trying to compromise and see what else they could do and where they could get things, where they couldn't, where they could save weight, and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't brilliant for Porsche at the start. They were not doing so well, and then they decided, well, let's try and throw as much of this car together as possible, and you know, take as much from the normal car. They did, and they managed to get it all done. And in 1996, they managed to actually get one car out, the first one anyway. So I said, okay, and it was just testing. They didn't actually get any, you know, racing going. And then they went into the LeMans race. And the works team, this is the first time they had a works team. The GT1s, these two 911 GT1s, finished first and second in class, and actually came second and third overall, losing out to a Porsche. You know, one of the prototypes. So suddenly they went, hello, this is something. I think we've managed to get something. And then when they started taking out in the championships, they managed to take victories in the last three races or something. They won in these 911 GT1s, which their code name was the 993 model, because that's what they're based off. So they managed to win that, and they thought, hello, this is quite good. And then the FIA came on board, and they thought, this is interesting, so let's make a GT1 championship. So you had the FIA GT Championship, which we know what cars go in there. We've seen the McLaren. So people thought, this is interesting, and Mercedes-Benz came on the scene, and they had a V12. And Porsche, again, much to their dismay, had problems with their turbochargers, with restriction of turbocharged engines, which meant that they lost power. So they thought, okay, so now they had the 996 Porsches. and they tried to make things, tried to change things, try and get better aerodynamics and that. It just didn't work, and 1997 was pretty bad. But in Le Mans, they started doing really well again. You know, they were doing incredible because they didn't have any restrictions again. Porsche was top of the field, but they failed to make it to the finish. So that was a bit embarrassing. They didn't make it to the finish. That was really embarrassing. But at this point, they decided Le Mans cars, these GT1 cars, are so different. In 1998, which is the car that we're looking at now you see where I'm getting. In 1998, they were so different, they decided to rename the GT1 cars to prototypes. Now, I'm sure you know the name already, Le Mans Prototype, LMP. Now, LMP cars did exist at this point, but these were also became LMP cars. They were still classed as GT1, but this was like almost the last time you saw GT1 racing was the 90s. These cars were fast becoming LMP cars. So, here comes this car now. They started going out with everything. You know, they made the car lower, they made the car longer, they made all these different bits and bobs. They put carbon fiber. Now we're getting carbon fiber on the monocoque as I go off. It was stronger. It was just a better car, and you still had the 6-cylinder engine, which we're about to go to. And the restriction, again, the FIA decided to go back on restrictors, but you know, they couldn't do much in the GT1 cars, but at Le Mans they just completely annihilated. They just went. They may not have been the fastest car, and they had small niggles here and there, but they finished first and second, and that was brilliant. And then Porsche decided to pull out of racing until 2015, where they showed up again at Le Mans with the 919 Hybrid, which is another car we've got in Assetto Corsa, and they come first and second again. So, you know, Porsche, rich history, very rich history. Let's get on to the specs of this car as I'm going. I've already been talking about this car for quite a long time. This car has a 6-cylinder flat 6. Of course, what do you expect? Boxer 6 engine. Back of the car, or mid-engine, it's a 3.2 litre engine, and it produces 540-ish brake horsepower at 7,200 RPM and 630 Newton meters of torque at 5,000 RPM. It's a pretty good car. It's got twin turbos as well, which you can hear. Direct fuel injection, 4 valves per cylinder, dual overhead cam. Like I said, carbon fiber all around now. Carbon fiber composite panel, carbon fiber monocoque. Everything was they were just trying to get as much as they could. 6-speed sequential paddle shift, rear wheel drive, and only weighs 940 kilos, which is pretty impressive. At 940 kilos, meaning that its top speed was something around what was it, 193, about 193 miles per hour, which is pretty fast. Admittedly, not as fast as the 962, but still very fast. So the car in the Assetto Corsa, well, we don't really have to worry about anything in the Assetto Corsa when it comes to modelling and all that kind of stuff, do we? It's just very simple in the Assetto Corsa. That is absolutely great. You know, it looks great inside and out. It looks like a GT1 car. If you remember the McLaren, what was it? The McLaren F1 GT1 car that we took a look at in the Dream Pack. It's got a similar kind of display. Everything's very nice. Everything's very fancy. What don't I like about this car? Modelling, texturing, I like. It does look a bit odd, but that's what these cars obviously look like. They became prototype cars. They were going to start looking a bit odd. Look at them now. They don't resemble real cars in any which way at all. You know, at least these resembled a bit, you know, these resembled real cars in some which way because there was an LMP series still going on. Anyway, moving back to this. Sounds. I like the sounds, but again, like the 962, it just feels like they're a bit too muted. And this is interesting. Oh, you can't hear it right now. When you're shifting through some of the gears, there's just a millisecond or a couple of milliseconds where it's just dead silent. Absolutely dead silent. And I just don't get it. It doesn't sound like... I don't know whether there's something wrong with the sounds there. It just doesn't match what the car does. Outside doesn't have that delay or that blank moment. But it is inside, it's just a bit annoying. Let's see if it's here. There, you just heard it just ever so slightly. I don't really understand it. But Physics are the big one. Interesting car to drive. After taking out the 962, I immediately took this out. It's a very different car. I think it's a bit more agile than the 962, but also a bit more prone to understeer, and it's a car that you get to push more towards the limit because it feels like it's got a lot more grip. So you do have to think about that. After taking out the 962, I'll be honest, this car felt incredibly tame and a little bit boring, but as you start pushing the car towards the limit, that's where the car comes alive. Below the limit, it feels like a very dull car, I'll be honest. But obviously these cars are designed to be pushed as hard as you possibly can. So I wasn't doing that, and I suppose that's why I didn't enjoy it as much. At the few corners where I did start pushing it, it did start becoming a little bit more alive, more fun, and that's where I realized exactly what this car can do. So it's a good car in that sense. I don't know, I don't think it's as fun as the McLaren F1 GT1 car. It just isn't as fun, even though the McLaren F1's from what, 1990, was it a 1995 model or a 1996 model? I can't remember. In fact, it could be a 1993 model. Anyway, whatever it is, this car is just not as fun as that. It really isn't. Very stiff suspension as well, so you don't want to take it up on the curbs as you saw just there. But overall, since I gave that other car a 9.5, I think I have to give this car, despite what it won, I suppose an 8.5 would have to be what I have to give this car. Or an 8.2. So I'm going to give this car an 8.2 because it's not as alive, it's not as engaging as the other cars that I've seen in this pack. So, nevertheless, it is a really good car. I do want you guys to try it out and let me know in the comments box below. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit the like button if you like this video, subscribe to the channel for more videos on Assetto Corsa, and do check out my Patreon scheme. Link is in the description box below. I would really appreciate your support. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode where I don't know what car I'm going to take out. Maybe I will take out that Porsche 919 Hybrid. I think I will take that car out since I've just been going through the LeMans cars one at a time. I went through I've been going through the LeMans cars one at a time, so I think I will take that car out. So I hope to see you guys in that episode.